Welcome back to the 127 Fit podcast. Today's guest is the Rainmaker. Today's guest is Sarah McDaniel. Sarah, I want to welcome you to the 127 Fit podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
For sure. So Sarah, we are just going to jump right into what I like to kind of call a conversational warm-up. I've got 4 questions that I like to ask all of my guests. The first question that I have for you is, how do you start your day? Do you have a specific morning routine or morning ritual that you like to stick to on most mornings?
Well, I wouldn't say every morning, maybe not even most mornings.
Okay.
Do I do the exact same thing? But the one thing that happens before I put my feet on the ground, pretty much every single morning, is I just tell myself something good is going to happen to me today. And then if I just kind of continue that through to whatever it might be. I almost always have a cup of coffee in the morning. I spend a few minutes with my 3 bulldogs, making sure that they're good and taken care of, but no specific every single morning kind of thing. Other than just confirming that something good is going to happen to me today.
Perfect. Now, I want to expound on that a little bit in regards to something good is going to happen to me today. What does that do for you? Is kind of like that whole thing of like positivity and positive thinking. Is that a big part of who you are and kind of like how you try to control your thoughts and your mind throughout each day?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I just believe that it helps me to just expect and set my expectation for the day. And so I'm telling myself and my environment that I have an expectation of something good happening. And it usually does.
Cool. I love that. All right. For the next 3 questions, if there's more than one, please feel free to share. The next question, do you have a favorite book, or is there a book that you like to gift often?
My favorite book that I believe steers my life more than any other book is the Bible.
Perfect.
I love to give Jesus Calling, the devotional that's like a daily devotional. But I also love to give The Go-Giver, which I have recently read for the first time about 6 months ago, and I feel like I've gifted it maybe 10 times since then.
Okay, cool.
So I just think it's great principles and an easy way to apply and read them. Yeah.
So The Go-Givers come up several times, I believe, on the podcast. What is kind of the impetus, or what is kind of like the gist of that specific book?
It's, instead of being the go-getter, it's about being the go-giver, and really helps to just identify what they call the 5 super stratospheric laws of success.
Okay, cool.
But one of them that I just really resonated with me was the law of value. I think it's the second law, maybe it's the first law, but it has to do with really our value being that we, or our worth being that we give minus what we get paid for what we give, and what's left is kind of the value, or what our worth is.
Okay.
And for me, it just was really interesting how the author, or the gentleman narrating, was talking to someone who had this really successful, well-known restaurant in downtown New York City.
Okay.
And they asked about how they had gotten started. And they talked about how they had started as a hot dog stand. And they had won at some point along in the early years an award for being the best hot dog stand in New York City. Now, in New York City, there's tens of thousands of hot dog stands. And so they inquired, how did you become the top hot dog stand? And he said that he gave them an experience when they came for their hot dog, and that the experience that they had was far greater and much more positive, and they received much more from that experience than what they paid for their hot dog. And he believed that was how he had risen to such great levels of success. Right. And I just thought, that's awesome. So, and there's tons of other little useful things that I think are easy to apply, or easier to apply.
Okay.
So it's an easy, fun book to give people, and it's so small, people don't seem to be too intimidated by it.
Cool. I'm going to have to check that one out, just like you expanding a little bit, or expounding a little bit on the law of value and talking about like kind of that experience within that book. I'm gonna definitely have to check it out because I know it's come up on the podcast before. So now the next one is, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, or word? And I kind of like to myself expound on this a little bit for my guests, because I know for me, like, quotes, mantras, and words are very important to me, but we all go through different seasons of life, right? So when I ask, do you have a favorite quote or mantra or word? It could be like in this current season of life, or maybe it's from a previous season of life. So however you kind of want to take that, it's kind of open to you. But do you have a favorite quote, mantra, or word?
I always say the best is yet to come. So I just love that. I think now I think people have heard me say it enough that I get little things all the time from people that say the best is yet to come. And but I just believe that the future is bright. Absolutely.
Cool. That's beautiful. Now, the final question, Sarah, in regards to kind of the conversational warm-up is, do you have a favorite or most listened to podcast? Now, I know that you have your podcast launching in January of 2020 called Social Capital Expert. So before you talk about maybe what your favorite podcast or your most listened to podcast is, please feel free to share a little bit more about the Social Capital Expert and kind of like what all of that is going to be for you in regards to podcasting.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, besides yours, of course, which I love, 127 Fit. I do love also to listen to Dax Shepard's Armchair Expert.
Yep.
I like how I built this on NPR.
Yep.
And I just like, there are some inspirational ones. My church has some podcasts and things that I like to listen to as well.
Okay, cool.
And yes, I'm really excited about having the opportunity. I've been working for almost a year now and just putting some content together and putting some interviews and things together with people that I just believe really understand social capital and who can see the value of the relationships that we have in our lives, and that they see those relationships and their ability to build them as being critical to their success in whatever area that might be. And so my guests are people from all different walks of life and places geographically. It's just really a great opportunity to share stories of people who are super interesting and I believe have given us opportunities to learn from their stories.
Cool, yeah.
So I hope to get that out there here soon. I'm planning for a launch in early January.
Okay, awesome.
And so be watching for Social Capital Expert. You can get to it through my website at sarahfrancismcdaniel.com, but also through socialcapitalexpert.com.
Perfect. Now, in regards to kind of like the whole, I know you just kind of mentioned you wanting to get some different things out there in regards to content, but why kind of like the medium of podcasting is something in regards to content? Why did you choose the medium of podcasting to get some of your content out there?
Well, I've known that I wanted to do and needed to do almost a podcast for over 2 years now.
Okay, cool.
I've done all kinds of things except for the podcast.
Yeah.
So now I'm finally just telling myself that nothing else is happening until the podcast is happening.
Okay.
So I actually did it all in a video form.
Okay.
Because I do believe that video is where we're headed.
Yep.
And I like the idea of doing it once and having a number of different ways to utilize the material, the content. So mine are actually all video that I'm turning into MP3, but I'll also be loading into YouTube.
Yep.
And I just think that it's a really cool way of people to be able to share experiences without necessarily having to be able to meet in person.
For sure.
That's why I chose it.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, I that's cool. And good on you for understanding that video is kind of like that next big thing, because we know with YouTube, like YouTube it's definitely not going anywhere. And that's kind of what I keep hearing in regards to the podcast experts. They keep talking about, oh no, yeah, no, it's all good.
Cool dogs.
It's good. I'm the free range podcaster, so my guests know that anything can go. But in regards to like video, that's what I kind of keep hearing. The podcast experts talk about is like kind of video is that next phase. There's already quite a few podcasts that have the video, but that's just going to be kind of like that next phase in regards to podcasting, and that next kind of, to go back to the Go Giver, giving just that experience, right? So good on you for understanding that and taking it right away and running with it. So, all right, Sarah, we are just going to kind of move into your backstory a little bit. So if you don't mind sharing with myself and the 127 Fit podcast listeners, where did you grow up? What did kind of those earlier years look like? Were you involved in sports? Were you involved in extracurricular activities? Kind of what was that childhood like for you?
Well, I was born in Fairplay, Colorado, which is where, that's like the home base of South Park. Mm-hmm. If you do or don't know, now you know.
Now you know.
And it was because my parents were in Breckenridge, Colorado, and Breckenridge at the time didn't have a hospital. Okay. So the story's been told, I've never verified, but I believe that it was actually a nursing home that had turned a wing into a prenatal ward, or a maternity ward, and so that was where I was born, and so I'm a high altitude baby, which must have something to do with why I can breathe really well when I snowboard, and I'm totally in my element when I'm on the mountain. But I was born in Breckenridge. I lived in a number of the ski towns, including Telluride when I was young, which was a great opportunity. That's where I learned to ski. And I just really had a great childhood. Every family has their oddities or whatever we want to call them. But that's part of what makes us family. And so I have two younger brothers that I was raised with. I have two brothers and a sister in my biological part of my family. And most of them are here in Colorado. Except my sister is in California. Through my childhood, I moved a lot, and I found myself living in 23 cities by the time that I moved to Denver when I was 20 years old. Most of those cities were in Colorado. A few of them were in Washington State. I went to Mesa State, which at the time was a college and is now a university. One of my friends told me that their dad graduated, got a diploma as college, and recently sent it in and asked for a university, and they sent him one. So I'm thinking, well, shoot, maybe I'll do that. Not that I have the diploma out anymore. Right. But I went back to my roots kind of in Grand Junction for college, and then moved to Denver in 2004. So I've been here now for 16 years. I love it. And what else? Does that give you enough?
We're gonna dig a little bit deeper. That gives us a quick little snapshot overview. But so in regards to kind of like sports and just like activities when you were younger, what did that look like?
I skied until I was 14 or 15, and then I started snowboarding. And snowboarding truly is one of my favorite things in the entire world to do. I love to snowboard. So I did a lot of skiing when I was young, and in 4th grade, I went to public school in 4th grade, but in 5th grade, I started homeschooling. So I actually homeschooled 5th grade through high school. Part of what that was really able to allow me to do was I was able to ski all winter competitively. Cool. So I did a lot of that when I was young, before I started to snowboard when I was about 15 or 16. And I played sports because I homeschooled. A lot of how I interfaced was through the extracurricular activities, through sports and athletics. So I did play softball. I quit playing when I went to college, but I played through high school. I also was on the swim team. Cool. So you would probably say that I was more of a tomboy growing up. I don't think I learned to carry a purse or even could stand to carry a purse until I was probably 24. So, I had to break myself into that a little bit, but overall, I think I just have always been someone who really enjoyed being outside and being a part of whatever activity is happening around me. So overall, I just like to stay active even now.
That's great. Now, you mentioned earlier the Bible and things like that. Was kind of like faith, was that a big part of your childhood and your upbringing or not?
Yeah, it was. So my dad was raised Catholic and
Okay.
really hadn't been involved much since he was young. My mom, I believe she was raised Methodist,
Okay.
and we had kind of gone through, we would always stay connected to a church. Moving a lot, we kind of saw all different types of
Yeah.
denominations, but we were always connected to a church.
Right.
More recently, though, it was kind of interesting. My personal story with salvation and with my belief is that it was something that was sort of far away, and God was something that was sort of far away, and it was a kind of a religious tradition or experience that I would have.
Yep.
Until I was, I would say, about 17 or 18, when I had probably what I would say was one of my first, like, kind of personal encounters that changed my life for what I was believing from it going from religion to relationship. But I would say that, you know, having homeschooled, a lot of our curriculum was based in a Christian perspective.
Yep.
So even from that, like, education perspective, we had some influence there, but it didn't necessarily mean that it was. Sorry, I just threw a pan at my dog because I don't know if you can hear this or not, but he found this moment to be the moment that he can't stop licking.
They probably the listeners probably can't hear it that much. So
okay.
it's to us we can hear it, but
he's just sitting here licking, and I'd like to get him to stop doing that. I apologize. I'm like, can
it's so
anyone else
good.
hear this? He's like,
you know what the beautiful thing is, Sarah? I don't edit, so this is gonna be in, and it's so good. It's real life though, right? It's real life.
Totally real
We're
life.
over at your house. You got dogs. They're like, you know, doing their
and they
thing.
just can't help but be as close as possible to everything that's happening when it comes to human beings.
It's
Anyway,
good.
so I knew at different points in my life that there was a purpose to why I was existing, but I don't know that I necessarily had a direct correlation to God.
Right.
I had more of a correlation to religion. Personally.
Yeah.
And then as I've gotten older and I kind of have had more encounters that I was more open to what might be happening around me, I've become more and more spiritual and convinced of the love that God has for me. And
So
all of us.
Yeah, of course. What if you don't mind me asking, what was that experience? Kind of like I think you mentioned something about like when you were around 18 or 19, you had kind of like an experience that maybe changed your perspective in regards to like religion to relationship. What was that experience, if you don't mind me just asking you that?
No, I don't mind. Families, I had gone off to college and there was just different things happening in my family, and my mom had started going to this church that I had been kind of opposed to her going to in our hometown, and then for whatever reason, because I never even knew anything about it.
Right.
And then I just started to see over the course of 6 months or so a change in my mom, and just in her outlook and her perspective on why she was alive, and it had a significant impact on me because I love my mom and seeing that there was a positive change meant that I wanted to know what she was experiencing. And so I went to this church and they were having some service. I'm not even sure if it was just a normal service or what.
Yeah.
But, and I just I opened myself up intentionally and just said, I want to experience what she's experiencing. And I want to know what's happening here. And so show me if there's something I need to know. And I pretty much, I don't know I don't know. But anyway,
it's your story.
I've kind of been like, people who lift their hands at church are weird. And I'm never going to do that. Like, that's weird.
Yeah,
so then I'm like in this moment where I walk into this church and I'm like, okay, something's happening. And then I kind of just became overcome by this beauty. I shut my eyes while the worship music was playing, and I just lifted my heart to the experience, and then started to experience like the most beautiful, amazing peace and power and love and light that I'd ever noticed or experienced in my life.
Yeah.
And I knew that I couldn't go through that moment without showing some sign of surrender and appreciation for what I was experiencing, which then caused me to raise my hands, which I thought was like the thing that was the weirdest thing you could ever do.
Yep.
All of a sudden I realized how could I do anything less? And so then I kind of went through that, and it changed. All of a sudden, in a second, I realized how close and personal God is versus what I had known, which was sort of religion, which I experienced God very far away and distant.
Right.
And so it changed dramatically for me ever since that day.
So, and then, a little bit ago, you mentioned kind of like just you used the term spirituality as you've kind of grown up and things like that. So where and what is your faith today? Is it, cause like out here in Colorado, and a lot of my guests that I bring on, they talk about quote unquote, like being spiritual or spirituality. And there's some different interpretations of what all of that is and different viewpoints. So like, where is your faith? Where is your spirituality at today? And kind of like, how do you look at that or define that?
Well, I would probably identify as a charismatic evangelical believer.
Okay, there you go. Cool.
So I don't know. I don't really.
Awesome.
I don't really necessarily label myself.
Right.
Because I, more than anything, am just doing my best to be authentically myself.
Yeah.
Before the Lord that I am experiencing. My walk with God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit is every day good, bad, and ugly. Which life has taught me that in the early part of my life, and until you go through things that kind of help reform some of our perspectives. I kind of could be almost like a chameleon in my ability to display what I thought people wanted or what I thought God wanted kind of thing. And I realized that that's very hard to sustain over the course of your life.
Right.
And thankfully God showed me that he loves me right where I am, just as I am, so that I can have the freedom to keep growing. So that's kind of my picture of like my spirituality, is that I don't find myself to be religious. I have been religious.
Right.
And I have been like kind of what I would have thought or what I perceive to be the perfect Christian kind of thing where
I got you. Yeah.
But my walk right now spiritually is much more just true to being right where I am and trying to grow from here.
Beautiful. All right, cool. I appreciate you sharing that because I grew up going to church and experienced religion and a lot of the things that you just talked about. So it's always, interesting to kind of like see how there are some parallels and some differences, as we grow up in a specific religion and we're kind of like conditioned to believe certain things. And then as we grow up, we really have to experience and step into our own faith and figure out what that's going to look like for each of us personally. So I appreciate the vulnerability and talking about kind of your faith experience, Sarah. So now remind me why you moved to 23 different cities when you were younger. What was the reasoning behind that?
Well, I'd like to know myself. I'm not exactly sure that there was always a reason. I think there were times that there were more moving reasons, such as like jobs or, my dad was in district management, and so sometimes there would be moving to open stores and then get those going and moving. Other times it was just that we had an opportunity to go and to do something different when we moved to Washington State and different things. So I'm not exactly sure. It wasn't a military thing. It wasn't something like that, which is what a lot of people who move a lot seem to be is in the military. But yeah, my parents just did it. And then what was funny is that my brothers, who are about 7 and 8 years younger than me,
Mm-hmm.
their experience is different because once we moved back to Colorado in about 98 or so, my parents were pretty stable in their living kind
Okay.
of space or area, and stayed in the same area for 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
So my brother's experience was a little bit different.
Yeah.
But, what it did for me though, during the time it might have been, sometimes I felt like I was always the new kid on the block.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back now, I'm so thankful for that because I find myself sort of empathetic to people who don't know anyone else or who are in situations where they look uncomfortable. Because I've been there and I know what it's like to be in situations where you don't know anyone ever. Over and over, you just don't know anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the end, I'm thankful for having kind of become more aware of
Absolutely
that part of people's experiences.
And as we kind of progress in your story and discuss social capital and things like that, that just really it's just interesting how those experiences kind of have shaped who you are today, and just kind of you connecting with so many people, and I'm sure kind of those experiences when you're younger have played a big role in you being able to understand social capital, connecting with different people, and all the things that you're involved in. So I'm always fascinated by how we can kind of look back on our childhood and some of those earlier experiences, how those form us into who we are and who we become as adults, right? So that's definitely an interesting tidbit from your earlier years. Okay, so you talked about going to Mesa State, and so kind of just talk about post high school, the college years. What did you study? What were some of those experiences like for you once you graduated from high school and moved on?
So because I homeschooled, I was able to get basically, when I was 14, I was doing pre-algebra, and my mom, as my instructor, we're looking at these books, and we're looking at the teacher's manual and the student's manual or instruction, whatever, the booklets.
Yeah.
And we're like, we don't know how to do this. My mom's like, okay, I got the general idea here, but I don't want to lead you down some path. Let's see what other kind of opportunities we can work on here.
Yeah.
And so I was able, at the time, Colorado Mountain College, the community college on the Western Slope, didn't have an age limit for how old you had to be to start attending classes. As long as you could pass the test and qualify into the class, they'd allow you to come in. Well, I was 14 and started taking the pre-algebra.
Yeah.
But just started taking classes there. And by the time I was 18, I had an associate's degree.
Wow.
From Colorado Mountain College. So
Dang.
It was really a cool experience. I was actually the youngest graduate ever at the time.
Yeah.
I think they actually changed their entry policy and put an age that you had to be a certain age, I think 16 at that point.
That's cool.
To be able to do it. But it really was great because by the time I was 18 and I was ready to go to college, I was a junior.
Okay.
So then I went to Mesa for those 2 years. I thought I was going to be, I really thought I wanted to be an attorney. Okay. My whole life, my family had always told me I should be an attorney because I could argue. So
there you go.
I always tried to win.
Yeah.
I was thankfully, as I've gotten older, I've been able to temper that some. I still work on it all the time, but as I kind of had situations, and I won't get into all of these stories, but I've got to write a book someday because it just was kind of unbelievable, the things that were happening as I was graduating. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to get out of Junction and I'm going to move to Denver. Okay. I'm going to go to school I was kind of looking at DU, CSU, kind of just getting to Denver and figuring out where I was going to go from there. I was 20 years old. Yeah. And I got down here. Things were interesting. The roommate that I brought with me turned out to be a total scam artist. I ended up kicking her out, being on my own, trying to figure out how I was going to afford it, but I knew I didn't want to go back. At the time, the group that I was in, it was like, oh God, this place, Grand Junction at the time, was like, they're like, if you leave, you'll come back. Everybody always comes back. And I'm like, I'm not going to come back. I've got to stay. Yeah. So I ended up getting into real estate. That was not ever the plan, but I ended up getting into the Coldwell Banker Real Estate Academy. And I made a deal with the managing broker of one of the offices here in town that failure was not an option. And he said that if I would commit, he would commit, and we would make sure that I was successful in real estate.
Okay.
So I did, and I had my first real estate closing before my 30-day mark, which is like unheard of. And it was really just because I had great coaching, and I was willing to do it because I knew failure was not an option.
Yeah.
I did real estate for about 6 years and really loved it. I sold residential real estate. Met so many incredible people, really began to understand the value of being consistent and building relationships. Really also began to see that you could connect revenue to relationships. But I also did not like having to drive people around in my car over and over and over and over with like, the worst was, and like I kind of feel like the straw that sort of broke the camel's back was when this baby cup of milk had spilt, like the entire baby cup in between the seats of my cute little BMW I had at the time. And then it rotted, and it was summertime, and it was, I mean, it pretty much ruined that car for probably 6 months. You could still smell the stench. And I just was like, okay, I don't love everything about this. I'm still pretty young. What else do I want to do with my life? And I had some other situations going on, and I just said, you know, I'm going to give my business, my real estate business, to my mentor, and they had a team. And if I come back, they'll give it back to me. But I'm going to go to seminary. So I went to seminary at Rhema Bible School in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Okay.
My little brother, who is 8 or 9 years younger than me, went down with me. He had just graduated high school.
Okay.
So we lived together, worked together, and went to school together. Which was a totally fun experience. We were immersed in theology and in Christianity studies, and it was really just an opportunity to go deep in stuff that I had some sort of interest in. And because I had had that experience when I was like 18, I knew that, you know, here it is 6 to 8 years later, and that experience still hadn't faded. Like I still knew that there was something, and so I just wanted to continue to know. And I knew that this was a time in my life. I didn't even have a dog at the time. I was like, this may never happen again. Like, I gotta do it. I'm really thankful I did. And and so then I ended up coming back to Denver. The guy that I had been dating while I was in real estate, he had come down to Oklahoma and had said, you know, let's get married. We've been together for 6 years, and we hadn't gotten to that point yet. And I'm like, okay, let's get married. After I finished my stay at Rhema, I came back, and we ran a construction company together. And then I got married.
Okay.
Keep going?
Keep going.
Okay. Yep. I'm like, where do I stop? I'm telling you my
No, you're good.
story
You're
here.
good.
But is this what you're asking for?
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Okay, so then I came back. We ran a construction company. We had opened a division here in Denver. We had one in Sydney, Nebraska, Sterling, Colorado. And I knew that things were off, but I didn't know exactly what. I really just kind of thought that stress was probably a big player in what was happening in our relationship, my relationship with the gentleman that I had just gotten engaged to. I was running a lot of our construction business out of our office and kind of doing the inside stuff. He was really taking care of a lot of the outside stuff.
Okay.
So as we would, open a division, he would kind of be out there doing that. I would come and go maybe for 2 or 3 days and then gone for 5. He would come back. But I could tell that something was a little bit just different. It was off, but just felt, but I didn't know what.
Yeah.
Well, long story short, we get married. He ends up beating me up in the limo, leaving my wedding reception. Kind of a whirlwind of about 7 months from that moment forward, where I realized that he had become addicted to Oxycontin. Believing that if I could help him find sobriety, we could move forward. And then having to sort of come to terms with the fact that even if he wanted to, he was not in a position to be thinking in a way that was safe for me. And eventually after 7 months, I ran for my life. I took my dog, which had been injured in some of the situation, and really that had kind of been the final straw.
Right.
And we went out on our own, and we kind of went into hiding and kind of took some time to heal. And that's probably where, I mean, and I don't mean for this to be an overly spiritual conversation, but that time frame, and in those moments, especially after really realizing I had left my marriage for good,
right,
is probably one of the biggest and most impactful spiritual times of my life as well. Because like I had said at one point, like, I had been really good at being anything people wanted me to be.
Yeah.
So I had always been able to really live up to a lot of the expectations that people had, or that I perceived that they had, whether they did or not. But when something as kind of, traumatic and just sort of catastrophic.
Right, right.
It really just had a ripple effect, that domestic violence and my marriage coming down in flames like that, or going up in flames, or whatever the cliche is, impacted just so many people connected to me, that I realized that I had let them all down, that everything that I had always been able to do, all of a sudden I was in some ways like a total failure from that perspective. I had been able to do so many good things, but all of a sudden it seemed that all of them meant nothing in that time or in that moment. And I remember having a moment where I really just felt like I had lost all ability to have a future, that I either had ruined it by the choices that I made, or that the things that had happened to me had ruined it, or whatever that might be. And in that moment, I remember feeling, for only just a split hair of a second, that I was totally hopeless, that my life was completely over, and there was no future for me. And instantly, I experienced a knowing that that wasn't the truth. And up to that point, it was really funny, because no matter what, when people would pray for me, didn't matter if it was my friends, pastors, random people I didn't even know, if anyone ever said, hey, can I pray for you? They would always, every single time, tell me, God just wants you to know how much he loves you. He just wants you to know how much he loves you. And I'd always be like, yeah, I know, I know God loves me, oh yeah. But it's all kind of superficial in some way. I look back and realize, because in that moment that happened, all of a sudden I had a sense and a knowing that my future wasn't over, and that God loved me, and there was still a plan for my life. And even if it was just me and God, that was all I needed. And the rest would come into place. And so ever since then, nobody ever reminds me that God loves me. It's crazy. And literally, it just happened so much that it was just almost like obvious that this was something new. So anyway, so then I was a part of the Gateway Battered Women's Shelter, and stayed connected in counseling and therapy, and really wanted to identify what was happening and how I could have understood things or done things differently, and from my own perspective, as well as just heal from some things. It doesn't really matter what I did. There were things that I had no control over. And so how do you then, move through that stuff? But and so about 4 months after I had left my marriage, so my best friend that I was living with at the time became the original Rainmaker at the job that I got. So in leaving my husband and in leaving my marriage, I also left my job. I left my car. I left my house. I left everything. And because my employment and everything was connected to my marriage in a lot of ways, I was really trying to figure out how I was going to start all over. And I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it in Colorado, if I needed to go somewhere else. I really didn't know. And so she got this job, and I started to watch what she was doing and how she was doing it, what her role was and what the company was like. And I'm like, this is the greatest thing. She doesn't even know how awesome this is. And so she didn't really know if it was the right job for her, or if she really was enjoying it as much as I thought she should be enjoying it. And so she kind of stepped down and said that wasn't the position she was interested in. And I was actually able to step into that position.
Perfect.
And so that was, 8 years ago. And it's been a really amazing journey of just really beginning to see how connecting with people, it doesn't matter what the product is or what the service is, but if you can connect with people and build trust, you can drive business in a major way.
Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna take a couple steps.
Yeah.
No, it's good and it's perfect. It's all good. I just want to take a couple steps back and dig a little bit deeper on a couple things you shared there, Sarah. Now, I just, before we kind of close the chapter and the discussion and the conversation in regards to your ex-husband and things like that, because you mentioned that you dated for like 6 years, is that correct?
Yeah.
Before the engagement and you got married.
It is.
What was there anything, and I want to kind of get your perspective on this, because this is the power of storytelling. This is the power of us as human beings sharing our story with the world, because somebody or somebody's is going to listen to this and they're in that situation right now, or they're coming out of it, and so you're going to be able to help them. And so I just want to ask you, so in those 6 years of dating this gentleman, were there any like violent signs, or was there some patterns that in your relationship in regards to him either verbally or physically abusing you? Because like you talked about, like he beat you up like on your wedding night, right? And so that, just as you shared that story, that seemed like super random. So were there some patterns, or and if not, what was kind of like the impetus then behind him responding that way to you on your wedding night?
Good question. There's a lot there. Definitely the relationship in those, 6 years previous had volatility.
Okay.
And, there were elements of boundaries that were crossed, that looking back, it's easy to see.
Of course.
And yet in the moment, because of whatever my experience or my perspective or how I saw myself, whatever it might have been, allowed for those situations to take place. Mm-hmm. But there had never been violence that had been so outright. And there had never been physical abuse in the manner that it ended up happening in. Mm-hmm. And, what's interesting is as you learn more, because I thought that would be a crazy thing too, that someone would be beat up on their wedding night by their husband. Like, that doesn't seem like that should ever even happen. But right. What the reality is that a lot of domestic violence situations happen within the first 2 weeks of a marriage taking place. So it happens more often than not, because when you already have some of those tendencies in those mindsets of power and control, when there's an element of being that kind of circle being complete, now they are your property, sort of, like there's a tie. There's something that is sort of triggered by that or impacted by that in their kind of mindset and the way that they're seeing things. Wow. So, yeah, I don't think it's as unusual as we might think, which is really sad. Yeah. But I definitely was a surprise. It was definitely not something that would have been expected at all. Mm-hmm. So, just through that experience and growing up in religion and different, experiences you've had with faith and there's different things that in different denominations and churches and backgrounds kind of like teach or preach a little bit heavier than others. And I'm specifically referring to like hell and different things like that, right? Was there, so when you, and then, like in conservative Christianity, like divorce is something that is, frowned upon, it's looked down upon, the Bible, speaks on it and things like that. So what I'm trying to move towards is that once, you decided just to, protect yourself and your dog and things like that, your future, and you went through with a divorce, you left your husband, all that, even though, there was just some crazy things going on. Was there a lot of shame and a lot of like, things that you had to kind of work through mentally because of maybe some of the things that you heard about growing up? And just, again, I know you touched on like you felt like you failed like people or everybody in your life, but was there some shame that you really had to work through in regards to following through with that divorce? Good question. I think that a lot of my working through happened while I was there.
Okay.
You know, it was incredibly confusing initially and all the way through, but you know, here I had just said, till death do us part,
Right,
for
right.
better or for worse. And when I made a commitment and a covenant of marriage, I took it very seriously, and I
course.
believe in the fact that we made a covenant with God. So it was, I worked through it. And when people say, you know, how did you stay so long, and what did I, and 7 months is really very quick. Most people, you know, it's far more damaging and far many more months that they stay. But it was because there were elements of it that I was working through while I was there, which had to do with understanding that I knew that I had given my all to this happening. And at one point, it was almost to the level of actually where I believed I was going to die or could die. And in that time was really when God spoke to me, because I'm like, what am I doing? Like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, how do I leave this person in the moment that I have just said, till death do us part, like for better, for worse? And then that's the moment that I choose when they're in their worst. Like, obviously this is their worst. Like, then I leave them. Like, how does that make any sense at all? And and I'd say, God, what do you want me to do? What am I supposed to do? But I realized that it's different. It's two very different things to be willing to lay your life down for your husband and for him to take it.
Right.
And I just knew that God loved me enough to not want me to die in order to honor, quote unquote, honor my marriage. And once that kind of settled in my heart, that I knew that God loved me more than me, he loved me honoring my covenant that I had made, I was able to take that jump. But it was a process, and I started calling the Battered Women's Shelter hotline weeks, maybe even months before I actually left. And I would call after every time that there would be abuse, and I would just talk to the random person and just have someone, because I didn't really share with anyone. There were very, very few people who knew what was happening. They would always sort of somehow say something along the lines of, it doesn't sound like you're ready to leave yet, but here are a few things you can start to do for when you're prepared. So I would take these little steps, and they would subconsciously, I think, just remind me that I was leaving someday. Maybe it wasn't today, but I was leaving someday. So it was a process. And then once I made that kind of commitment and knew in my heart, it was so interesting though, because here I had for all these months been asking, what do you want me to do, God? Like, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to stay or go. What is the right thing? The moment that I left, which was the thing, I wasn't sure if that was the right thing or not, until I knew that he didn't want me to die. I knew I wasn't supposed to die.
Right.
Everything started to fall into place in like this way that was so clear that I had done what I was supposed to do, that every little detail had been taken care of. Even, I mean, it was like everything from the first police officer that I talked to was a woman. They had a place at an opening at the shelter where I could get right into some of the stuff that I needed to be involved in. It was just all of this stuff that just started. And I look back over the last 8 or 9 years now, and it just has continued to be that way, where there's just been just provision in every step.
Cool. That's good. And thank you for just being willing to touch on and talk about that stuff, because I know it's probably not the easiest thing sometimes, but again, I know that people are gonna appreciate it and be impacted. So I wanna fully kind of dive into what I introduced you as, and that's the Rainmaker. And I want you to kind of I want you to explain what it means to be like a rainmaker, what all of that is. And then once you kind of unpack that, I want to like fully dive into like social capital, because we have somebody in common, and it's Matt Stewart. He actually introduced me to you, and like he's been on my podcast. Super cool guy. But in our conversation, he kept talking about like he actually wanted me to introduce him as like a social capitalist, and I'm like man, I was like I don't even really know what that was, and he was talking about social. Being social capital and stuff like that, and I kind of like he did a great job of explaining kind of what that is in regards to me. I think after we probably shut off the podcast, but this terminology before I met Matt was like completely it's completely new, right? But the more I've like kind of like learned about social capital and like what it really means, it's like it's just very powerful. So what does it mean in regards to being a rainmaker? Like what does that entail? And then let's kind of like fully dive into social capital, why that's so important to you, why it should be so important to all of us human beings, and then we'll kind of move on from there.
Well, rainmakers are not new. It's a term that's been used in the law and accounting industries for a long time. Usually the rainmaker is part of the directors or the C-suite. They usually are a high-level position that interfaces with the decision makers and the leaders of companies to really help drive business. Okay. And primarily the way they do that is through building trust and building relationships, and then creating opportunities for those relationships to be executed on. So that's really what I do. I do it for the construction industry, and in the construction industry, which is a place where rainmaking isn't really a norm necessarily. I think it's becoming more and more a norm. I have all these great humans that I'm connected to that I believe are rainmakers and are making it rain everywhere they go. Yeah. But it was a pretty new idea, I think, at least here in Denver and in our industry. And the idea is really to just be connected to the customers, the potential customers, to be building relationships, developing trust, and setting the foundation or building the foundation for business to be done. I mean, everyone knows that we're there for the purpose of closing a deal, but how we get there is sometimes totally different.
Now, being a rainmaker, like, are you actually, because you just mentioned like kind of like closing deals, are you actually a salesperson in the sense of, are you actually pitching and closing, or are you just kind of like the in between in regards to like kind of like who you're rainmaking for, and then maybe like a potential customer? Are you just kind of like a just kind of like that connection and maybe like speaking back and forth like a negotiator? What are the actual kind of like finer details of being a rainmaker?
I think it varies depending on what your, industry and product or service or however your position is set up. But for me personally, I don't get involved on the specs, pricing, the details of actually closing the deal. But I still see myself as a sales piece of the process. Of course, yeah. From the perspective of knowing that in the end, my goal is to sell something. It's just that I really think I do it, instead of being in a transactional method, I do it from a relational method. Okay. So traditionally, rainmakers are paid commission, which really kind of ties them to that sales idea, right? Because you want to win with the team, lose with the team, and you benefit when you knock it out of the park. So there's that element. But I don't believe that this position has that kind of that pressure or sometimes that desperation to meet sales quotas. I don't sense that at all. My goal really is to create an opportunity to be a resource, to add value, and to develop the kind of relationship that they want to help me do better because they appreciate and recognize that they're having a positive experience based on effort that I'm putting out towards them.
All right, so social capital, like we've touched on it a little bit just because of your podcast, but what is social capital? Why is it important for all of us human beings to understand what it is and to have that social capital within our own personal lives?
Well, you mentioned Matt Stewart.
Yep.
And I believe he's like the OG of social capital. He's like the original gangster of social capital. I mean, he has more social capital than probably anyone I've ever met, and has the ability to help other people grow theirs in a way little people do, and or few people do. The idea of social capital really, I think, is just this creating and understanding and recognizing the value that your network has, and that the relationships that you are cultivating have in the overall success of your life. You know, you can get a job through your network. You can introduce two people who have a need and a service through your network. You can provide resource, and then ultimately you end up benefiting, but a lot of it is about being able to be a resource and a connector to the people around you.
Perfect. So what in this position of being a rainmaker, and then just like your understanding of social capital, what's been like something, let's say over the last year or two, that you have really learned that has been very impactful and profound in your own personal life?
About social capital?
Yeah, just like, between like social capital and maybe kind of like your own network and connections, and then being the rainmaker, which the rainmaking and the social capital, that all ties together. But just like over the last year or two, what's been like something through your network, through your actual career, job, what have you, what's been one thing or two things that have just been like, huge learning experiences for you that have been very profound in your own personal life?
Well, something that I talk about regularly, because I still am just amazed by what I learned, is the experience of having my bulldog's mate or whatever, and I had 10 puppies. 10
puppies, all right, that's a lot.
So I kept one, that's why I have 3 dogs. I have the mom, dad, and the baby, one of the babies.
Yeah.
But in the experience, I'm not a breeder, that's not my intention. I just wanted to have my bulldog's son. And this was the process that I was going about to do that. It meant I gave my heart, my family, my fiance, we gave our heart and soul to these 10 puppies for those 12 weeks that we had them. And we developed a very strong bond and care for them, and wanted to be sure that they went to homes that were going to do well by them and treat them the way that we would have treated them. And so we started to come up with an idea and try to figure out, how do we create a community? Well, I learned so much just about how powerful community is in this process, because every day I would do a video of all the puppies, and every puppy had its own color of collar. And we didn't even want to name the puppies because we didn't want to get too attached, but they all ended up keeping their names.
Yeah,
we named them based on their colors.
Cool, perfect.
So it was fun. Well, every day on social media, I would talk about the puppies. I'd do a spotlight on all the puppies once a week. We'd kind of do this thing. And then I hosted 3 events during the course of these 12 weeks that was called Puppies and Prosecco. And I would allow people, anybody, whether they wanted to buy a puppy or they didn't want to buy a puppy, but just to come and play with the puppies on a Saturday morning. It was amazing because all 9 puppies, besides the one that I kept, went to either friends, family, or people in my network. We have a closed group on Facebook. We have celebrated their 1-year birthday, and 9 of the 10 puppies, even the one that lives out of state, came back for the birthday.
Cool.
I almost didn't throw that birthday party, even though that had been part of what I had talked about when I was selling those puppies. Was that we wanted to have people come back for the birthday parties and stay connected. But I had so many people emailing me and asking me, hey, we're about a month out from the puppy's 1 year. What are we doing for the birthday? And when I told them, hey, I was thinking about not doing it, they're like, no way. That's why we bought the puppy. We want to be part of this community. And so one of the things I just learned is that, not only will people pay a premium, but it's super powerful to bring people together around a common bond, whatever that might look like. And when you do, it's easy to keep engagement because they're bringing their energy into it and creating and keeping that momentum moving. And so now as I look at things, whether it's a development or an idea for something I want to build, in another town or something, I always kind of see myself viewing the community piece of it differently based on my experience with selling those 9 puppies.
Yeah, I love that. What's something, we'll kind of take it just like with the last question, I said, within the last year or two. So let's keep it within that time frame. But what's something, Sarah, that over the last year or two that you have been working on personally in regards to maybe like working through it, leaning into it, stepping into it, breaking through it? What's been maybe a struggle, an issue, just something personally that you have been working on over the last year or two?
I mean, pretty recently, every day I'm working on several things. I mean, my goal is to just be growing every day.
Yeah.
But sometimes I would resonate with being someone who would be in need of controlling or having things perfect and, really taking the bull by the horns and making something happen. Which there's a lot of positives in some of those, but they can also be super detrimental. And they can add a lot of like stress and tension and intensity to life that maybe we don't need. And they rob us of joy. And so one thing that I realize is that in some of these situations that I'm walking through or that I encounter in life, I'm really focused on just taking on and being concerned with the things that I have the power to do something about. And the things that I don't have the power to do something about, I'm just believing that what I need will be there when I need it. And it's been amazing. Here recently, that has just been something that I've been focused on. Any situation or circumstance where I say, do I have the power? I find myself worked up about it. And I'm like, do I have the power to actually do something about this? No. Okay. Thank you that I will have what I need in this situation when I get there.
Right.
And I surrender this and letting this go and then handling and moving forward with the things that I do have control over. And I'm watching things where I would have stressed myself out, probably lost sleep, maybe even treated people poorly. I'm now surrendering and staying focused on the things I can actually do something about, which makes me feel empowered. And those things that I was worried about really are like lined up. It's really kind of amazing. I'm like, oh my gosh. And then what happens is that then I find myself in a place of gratitude because then I'm like in awe of the fact that this actually happened, that everything that I needed that I thought I was going to worry about, but I tried to in effort surrender over and over, actually was there when I needed it. And now I'm so thankful I can hardly believe it. It's kind of cool. I mean, it's all effort and it takes effort to change those mindsets that it's easier for me to worry about it or easier for me to think I need to take control over it. That's easier. It's harder for me to let it go, surrender it, and trust that it's going to be, and then not talk about it, think about it, or worry about it again. But what's cool is that once I take that step and make that effort, I see the results, and then I have gratitude and thankfulness. Which is totally energizing.
Positivity. I want to go back to that before we kind of head towards the finish line and touch on a couple other things, because that's just like you start your day with positivity. Just mentioning something good is going to happen to me today. That's what you said, kind of is like the first thing that you speak when you wake up and focus on. So how important is it? Because I'm a huge proponent of positivity. I'm a huge proponent of controlling my mind and my thoughts and things like that. So how important is positivity to you? Which I know it's very important, but maybe a little bit deeper than that. How do you just continue to focus on positivity and continue to incorporate that in your day-to-day life?
I just believe it's a choice. And I know that when I choose positivity, it's easier and easier to keep choosing positivity.
Absolutely.
But I also realize that when I choose negativity or go down the path of whatever, something that is negative, it's very easy to keep going negative.
Of course.
And then it's harder to pull all of that back and bring it back into positivity. So I just keep trying to choose positivity, and not that everything is always perfect, but truly just believing that if I stay in a positive place in my mindset about what's to come, something good is going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah. And from my experience, Sarah, just how we think, how we train our brain, that's gonna show up in our lives. Because I'm a firm believer that, like what we think, like that's who we are and that's who we're going to become. So just that, if we can train our brain even in the maybe quote unquote unpositive situations or the negative situations in life, if we can train our brain and position ourselves to just continue to think positive, then that's going to allow us to just live that much more of an impactful life and a powerful life. Because I look back and I had a flat tire. I don't know. It was during that nasty snowstorm we had maybe a month ago, and it was just the worst day to have a flat tire, all this different stuff. That's not really the way I wanted my day to unfold. But I just really kept that positive attitude, and I just kind of have some mantras and words that I repeat in my mind. And it's what? I was able to interact with some human beings that otherwise I wouldn't have if the flat tire didn't happen, right? So just changing. Or controlling our thoughts and training our mind to think a specific way, that's really going to manifest and show up in our lives in a lot of other ways, like you mentioned. So
I think that's the excitement really of life, and the thing that keeps life interesting is by looking at every kind of moment or opportunity as an adventure, as an opportunity for something to present itself that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
And then when you're open to it, it always happens.
Yeah.
It's when we're kind of closed to the idea that something good might be happening around us, but we just feel inconvenienced, that we miss what might actually be the best part of our day.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Yeah, no, that's well spoken, well received on my end. Now, when you go to your website, there's 3 words that are very clearly written out. And that's purpose, passion, and power. So I just want you to touch on a little bit in regards to those 3 words, why they're on your website, kind of why you kind of hold those close to your own personal heart.
Well, I did a retreat, and I plan to do one in 2020 as well on purpose, passion, and power. And really on just identifying and discovering our purpose, really igniting our passion, and unleashing our power. And I just think that the idea is that if we can identify our purpose, we can be really energized, which is I really think a lot of what passion is that energy to do what we're here to do. And then when we have that, we can really unleash our power, which is our ability to actually make an impact, to get things done, and to move in a direction. And so my real heart in life is to just have an impact on the world around me. It might be through one person at a time or a few people in a small group, whatever it may be, but to just help people identify the awesomeness already in them. Is that even a word, awesomeness?
I don't know. Who cares? It works.
The greatness in them. And help them just have tools and perspective that take them even up to another level of the greatness that they recognize within themselves.
Cool. Do you believe that a human being can live their greatest version of themselves or their most powerful version without knowing specifically what their purpose is?
Yeah, I think yes. I mean, I don't think we have to specifically know. I can't say I specifically know what I'm on this earth to do, specifics, but I kind of gave up on specifics back with my marriage.
Okay.
I just realized that if I specifically expect things, I often wind up disappointed. But if I can generally expect something good, I'm virtually never disappointed. So I sort of feel the same thing about purpose, is I think that there is an opportunity to have a specific purpose where you may know, I'm called to be a veterinarian. I'm called to be this. Or I feel purposeful in my soul when I'm moving in that direction. That's great. But I also think that there's an element of just having a sense of purpose to the fact that you're present today for the people that you encounter, and vice versa, that they're present today for encountering you. And that the purpose might only be, like, for me personally, I have all of these things in my heart that I believe I want to do while I'm on this earth.
Mm-hmm.
And that those things are connected to my purpose.
Mm-hmm.
But I also believe that my day-to-day, moment-by-moment purpose is to just love people. And it doesn't matter how overwhelmed I might feel, how big of a failure I might feel if I'm behind on things and not, getting things done in a way I think I should, or not sticking to this, that, or the other. It doesn't really matter, because if in the moment I get back to what I think my purpose is today and for this moment, and it's to love people, I can go into the grocery store and buy an apple and some salad and be living in my purpose of loving the people. I can be kind to the person that checks me out, kind to the guy that helps me at the door, and be fulfilled in what I believe I'm supposed to be doing here and now.
Cool. Well put. All right. So before I ask you the last question, I'm going to name or give you 4 like individual words, and I just want you to just tell me, Sarah, kind of like what the first thought or thoughts when I mention that word that kind of pop up in your mind. I just want you to share what those thoughts are. Is that cool?
Sure.
Okay. So I've got 4 words. I'll just give you the word. Whatever kind of initially pops up in your mind, you just share it. So the first word is money.
Resource.
Resource. Okay. The second word, relationships.
Key.
Key. All right. Cool. The next word, passion.
Essential.
Essential. All right. And then the last word, love.
What it's all about.
What it's all about. Cool. Love it. All right. So the last question, Sarah, that I have for you is, what sets your soul on fire?
Well, I think I kind of said that just a few minutes ago. It's just being a part of things that are having an impact and connecting with people in a way that creates and promotes and inspires growth and self-exploration. I just am set on fire when I can just connect with the people around me, the world around me, in a way that creates enthusiasm and trust. And I just really enjoy being in engaging conversations and relationships.
Absolutely. So in this next moment here, I just want you, if there's anything that we didn't touch on, or if there's just something that's maybe really burning inside of your heart and your soul that you kind of want to put out there and share with the world, I just want you to be able to share that. And then once you kind of touch on that or share that, if people have resonated with your story today, if they want to find out more about you and find out more about what you've got going on with your podcasts and things like that, once you get done kind of sharing your last statement or message, just also share where people can reach out to you in regards to social media, websites, things like that.
Well, I've shared a lot.
Yeah.
And I appreciate you having me and
For
listening.
sure. Yeah.
And giving me the opportunity to share. I just encourage people to just be powerfully authentic and to be willing to grow, to be willing to do some self-reflection, and to give each other some grace and just cut some slack to one another. Where not that we have to accept bad behavior, but where we can try to understand from one another's perspective that there might be something else going on here. And I would love to share. My website is sarahfrancismcdaniel.com, and that's Francis with an ES, not an IS. Also, I'm on Facebook at Sarah McDaniel Rainmaker, LinkedIn, Sarah McDaniel Rainmaker, Instagram, Sarah Francis McDaniel. But I would love to connect. And I'm also hosting some events during 2020, some workshops where people can actually meet and interact with the guests of my podcast.
Cool.
So you can find all that information on my website as well.
Perfect. All right. So, Sarah, I just, personally want to thank you for your time and for inviting me into your home. And I really appreciate your authenticity and your willingness to share your story. And I'm looking forward to staying connected with you, and I'm looking forward to listening to your podcast when it drops in January 2020, right?
Yes.
Okay,
sir.
cool.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, you're very welcome. So 127 Fit podcast listeners, I just want to once again thank you for your listening ears. Per the usual, I'm just so thankful for you tuning in, for listening to the podcast, for hanging out with Sarah and myself today. If you would like to find out more about myself personally or the guests that I'm bringing onto the podcast, you can find out more on Instagram at 127fit. Facebook is at Quentin Vars. LinkedIn is at Quentin Vars. If you guys would do me a huge favor and please leave a 5-star rating and review, and also subscribe to the podcast, that would be cool. If you are looking to lose weight, gain muscle, or get healthier, please email me to set up a free 30-minute fitness consultation. We are fastly approaching 2020, and if you are actually listening to this in 2020, please still reach out to me, and that email is 127fit@gmail.com. We will talk about fitness goals, we'll talk about nutrition, we'll talk about sleep and mindset, all the health and wellness things, so you can become and move towards the best version of yourself. If you think you would be a great guest, or if you have a friend or an acquaintance you think would be a great guest or guest for the 127 Fit podcast, you can also send an email or give this email out, 127fit@gmail.com. And another huge favor I'd ask you guys, as you are finding value in an episode or episodes of the 127 Fit podcast, just take that specific episode or episodes and share it on your Facebook and Instagram stories using the hashtag #BeSomeoneToFollow. And then per the usual, I will leave you with Proverbs 24:10, which states, if you faint in the day of adversity, your strength is small. This time until next time, I will catch you guys later.